I've got 2:03, so we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Rudzowski. I'm Sales and Marketing Coordinator for Turnkey Technologies. And from everyone here at TTI and E-Rate Consulting, we want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. And to those of you on the call that aren't familiar with Turnkey Technologies, we are a global provider and value-added reseller of networking and security solutions across all vertical markets, but most especially K-12. We are your one-stop edge-to-cloud service provider, and at TTI, we don't work with every vendor under the sun like our competitors. It's important to know we carefully select and evaluate our partnerships, and we only choose to work with the best-of-breed technologies, such as HP Aruba Networking, to deliver to our customers. We've achieved the top tier of partnership, platinum partner status with HP Aruba. We've also been invited to be part of both the Aruba Global Ambassador Program and HPE Global Ambassador Program. That is an elite group of 56 global partners that are shaping the future of the business. But when it comes to real value add, our key differentiator is the way we support our clients. TTI provides complimentary 24/7, 365 help desk support for the first year with every installation that we do. This support is over and above your manufacturer support, and it's all handled in-house by our award-winning TTI engineers. It's our passion and our mission to ensure that your solution runs flawlessly. We don't know anyone in the business that provides this level of support. It truly does set us apart from any other technology partners you may have worked with in the past. The reason we're able to do it, we trust in the products we offer, and equally as important, we trust in our experience and the design we create for you. On top of that, we have the greatest team of engineers on staff in the office ready to help. They're all deeply certified, both with the manufacturers we support, but also agnostically. Our dedicated clients are always telling us that our engineering team has become an extension of their team, and really that is our goal. We believe you couldn't make a better choice than to partner with TTI for your networking and security needs. Today's presentation is on E-Rate 2024, and this session will be co-hosted with E-Rate Consulting. Let's keep it interactive. We encourage you to put any questions you have into the Q&A during the event, and they will get addressed either live or when the session concludes. Our presenters today will be Vince LaForgia and Jeff Sweeney from E-Rate Consulting, and our very own Aruba and HPE Global Ambassador, Mr. Chris Vole, the VP of Technical Services for Turnkey Technologies. I'll let the experts take it from here, so without further ado, here's Chris Vole to kick us off.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining. Mine's going to be pretty quick. I wanted to just roughly go over some of the changes that are coming into the network world that we are seeing a lot of customers ordering and posting for E-Rate products for. The latest and greatest wireless has now been released. It's Wi-Fi 6E, which incorporates the 6 gigahertz band for wireless. So prior to this, just 2.4 and 5 gigahertz were what you used for wireless. Now the third band has been released, 6 gigahertz band. It actually comes with 59 additional channels that we can use for wireless, and it's designed to be bonded together for large bandwidth moving capabilities. An access point, depending on the model of the access point, can move anywhere between 7.8 gigs of throughput or down into 3.9 gigs of throughput, which is the normal AP that we're seeing deployed into schools. With that change comes new power requirements to power 3 radios inside of an AP. The switches that we're looking for would be looking for 60 watts of PoE power. That's called 802.3 BT power. Some manufacturers call it PoE++. It's actually known by 802.3 BT power. That's 60 watts, and then there's an additional bump up from that one to which is Class 8 PoE. Class 8 PoE is 90 watts of PoE power, and we're usually seeing that powering some larger APs or some of the larger video cameras with IR rings on them. The additional changes that are available on those same switches for the new PoE power are smart rate ports. Smart rate ports allows us to do 1, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig over existing Cat 5e or better copper. So as I said before, both of the APs that are out in the marketplace right now, or all three of the APs that are out in the marketplace right now for Wi-Fi 6E, have the capability to move over a gigabit of data per port. The one has dual 5 gig copper ports. The middle tier has dual 2.5 gig copper ports, and the low end tier has a single 2.5 gig port on it. So that with that switch infrastructure change, allowing the ports, it's called smart rate, allowing smart rate ports to be on switches. If you can get more into the switch, you want to be able to get more out of the switch. So the changes for the fiber infrastructure are that the optics we're loading into these switches are actually 25 gig optics, and they work over OM4 fiber or single mode fiber, and allow you to do 25 gig connections back to your core. So you have no data being left at the access point or buffered at the access point. It's full non-blocking. We also offer firewalls. We represent Palo Alto for firewalls. We have cloud management of both wired and wireless networking. We do our own structured cable, both copper and fiber. We actually manufacture and install our own fiber. It's all our engineers that are out in the field. We do not sub anything except for one piece of that structured cabling, and that is horizontal boring. If we need to go under a paved driveway, or go underground from the building to a football field, we have the capability to do that. We work with only one company for that, but we don't do that directly. They are managed by our cabling team. And then we also, from everything you see on the screen, we offered managed services over and above all of that. So those are the things that I wanted to point out prior to handing off to the team. And if there's any questions about any of that, you can put them in Q&A, and we can address them either during or after this. And I will hand off to Vince and Jeff.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, TTI, for inviting us for another webinar to go over some of the E-rate basics. We're going to go through some slides here. I'm going to talk about predominantly the most fundamental aspects of the program, basic categories of eligibility, what those entail, discount rate calculations, some of the real baseline information that you need to understand the program. And then Vince is going to jump into some of the more complex information, category 2 budget calculation, category 2 budget cycles, and some of the new developments in the program, because there has been a lot going on in the last 18 months. Some of it is starting to come to fruition. Some of it is still in the pipeline, but nevertheless, definitely deserving of some discussion. So just a little background about our company. Vince formed the company, almost 25 years ago, Vince, in 2000. Prior to that, he was a reviewer for USAC. He actually not for USAC, it was another company called NECA, and they were responsible for reviewing the E-rate applications. So we've been providing E-rate compliance services for over 20 years as a company. We are the New Jersey School Board Association's partner for E-rate compliance and process management services. That means that you can procure our services through the NJSBA using the specific procurement number. You don't need to go to RFP or RFQ for our services. We currently have over 160 clients. Actually, we have about 180 clients nationwide now, about 160 of which are New Jersey, maybe a little bit less than that. As a team, we have well over 60 years of combined E-rate experience between us. And since 2015, which is the year when they revamped the E-rate program and made funding support available to everybody for equipment. So since 2015, we filed over more than 1,000 Forms 471 and over 4,000 individual funding commitment requests. And really the point of that is just to illustrate that we are in the mix every day. This is what we do. And we have loads of experience with this new iteration of the E-rate program and its category 2 rules. So what is E-rate? E-rate is a federal discount program administered by the FCC. I'm sure that over time, many of you have noticed the universal service fee on your cell phone bills. and back in the day when we had landlines, you may have seen it on your landline. The universal service fee is a fee that's collected by the FCC to administer several programs, one of which is the E-rate program. So the E-rate program is a pool of funds that's set aside every year, and it's used to provide annual discounts on eligible products and services. What's important to keep in mind is that this is not a competitive grant, which means that everybody can apply so long as you meet certain very, very basic eligibility criteria. You do not have to fill out any paperwork to be eligible to apply. All you need is to fulfill certain eligibility criteria, and I can fill you in on that. Just not really important to get into the details here. Each funding year runs in lockstep with your school year. Okay, so the E-rate funding year typically will mirror your district fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. With respect to category 2, the funding year can change a little bit. We'll get into those specifics. But July 1st to June 30th is what typically is considered to be the E-rate funding year. So there's 2 categories of service. Category 1 is your telecommunication services, excluding voice. So it's your dedicated internet access. So if you have a dedicated circuit for your internet access, or a business class connection, if you have a shared connection through Verizon Fios or through Comcast, that's also category 1. Your wide area network services are also category 1. If you have leased dark fiber, that is eligible under category 1, as well as dark fiber maintenance and operation contracts. Self-provision networks. And self-provision networks is to some degree jargon, E-rate jargon, in the sense that it is intended to represent networks that a district deploys itself. So a district may consult with a company that will build its network, and then the district will own it and it will operate it. Category 2, on the other hand, is your, again, E-rate jargon, what they refer to as your internal connections equipment. Okay, so that's switches, access points, any related licensing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just got to notice that my microphone dipped out. So it's the that equipment, as well as any related licensing and any related professional services. And then there's also what's referred to as basic maintenance services. That really is the OEM support. Okay, that is a very tricky type of funding request. So we'll get into a little bit more about that later. And then managed broadband services, which TTI in their slide before this one showed that they provide all kinds of managed services that would fall under the E-rate eligibility category 2. So your discount rates can range from 20% to 90% for category 1. And then for category 2, the maximum discount rate is 85%. The reason why they staggered those two is essentially so that school districts or applicants would have more skin in the game when pursuing their category 2 projects. The way that the discount is calculated is typically through a calculation of your free and reduced lunch proportion of students. So if you have 1,000 students, 750 are eligible for free and reduced lunch. 75% of your students are therefore free and reduced lunch eligible. 75% free and reduced lunch eligible corresponds to a 90/85% discount rate. And you can receive your discounts in one of 2 ways. So you can pay your invoices and receive your discounted portion as a reimbursement, or you can work with your service provider and have the service provider issue you discounted invoices, and the service provider will then go to USAC to obtain the residue. The application cycle is annual. You must apply annually for funding support. The Form 470 is what triggers the process. The Form 470 is where you communicate to the world, what are you requesting bids for? What services are you requesting bids for? It triggers a mandatory 28-day competitive bidding period. You must wait 28 days before you issue any awards. If you sign a contract or you issue a written award within the 28-day window and you are audited, or they conduct some kind of competitive bidding review during the PIA process, your funding request will be denied, period. End of story. Nothing you can do about it. So be mindful of that 28-day competitive bidding period. It is crucial. After you have waited the 28 days or longer, you can set whatever duration for a competitive bidding period you want, the minimum is 28 days. After you have made your award, you will file what's called a Form 471. The Form 471 communicates to USAC the service, the vendor, and any other related specifics, and also the total funding commitment request amount. So that's the amount of funding you are seeking in correlation to each specific funding request. After the Form 471 is reviewed and approved, you will file a Form 486 that communicates to USAC that you have either started those Category 1 services or intend to pursue those Category 2 projects. And then the Form 472 is the bear form. That's the request for reimbursement, which I discussed previously, where the applicant will pay the invoice and then submit the request for reimbursement of their discounted portion. And then the service provider invoice method is the other version where the service provider goes to USAC to get paid. So again, the Form 470, it's a formal request for quotes. In almost all circumstances, the Form 470 is a mandatory predicate to E-rate eligibility. And what that means is there are certain limited circumstances where you do not need a Form 470. And that is only when you are seeking that is only when you are looking to procure business class internet services that are less than $300 per month per location. Okay, so if you're a 3-school district and you have a business class internet connection at each site and each connection is less than $300, then you do not need a Form 470. Selecting your service provider, again, as I mentioned, if you make any awards within the 28 days, that's a big mistake. Your purchasing decisions, and that includes your competitive bidding evaluations and so on, must not only comply with E-rate program rules, but they must also comply with state law and local rules and regulations. Okay, so that is very important. It's not necessarily realistic that the people at USAC know all 50 states' procurement rules and regulations, because they don't. But in the event of an audit and they bring in an outside auditor, they will get into the weeds and they will do that deep dive to determine whether or not you have actually acted in compliance with both your state law, and if you have local procurement rules and regulations, they will look at those as well.
And it's especially important if you run into a vendor that may want to challenge your award, that you have followed the correct process, because they may point out some aspects of it that they don't feel are correct.
Good point. Thank you. So another thing that's very important to note is that when you are making an E-rate award, you need not choose the low bid. Okay. But you must choose the most cost-effective solution. Okay. And what that means is that you will create a bid evaluation matrix, and the cost of eligible goods and services must be weighted heaviest. But you can have any number of factors so long as that they are reasonably defensible. And what that means is they have to make sense. You can't have a bunch of irrational, illogical criteria that are not objective, that you cannot use subjective criteria necessarily.
So you're allowed to compare apples to apples. If you need a 48 port switch and somebody bids a 24 port switch, obviously it's going to be less expensive, but it's not applicable for what you're requiring, and so on, right? 1 gig versus 10 gig. And there's going to be other aspects of the solution, right? Aspects of the technology that helps it integrate into your current infrastructure that can be part of the evaluation process.
Right. So the bid evaluation process is something that Vince and I place in an inordinate amount of weight on. And we spend a lot of time explaining these to our clients so that they understand how to make these evaluations bulletproof in terms of an E-rate review. Category 2, as I mentioned before, is the equipment and services necessary to distribute Wi-Fi connectivity to devices within your school buildings. Okay. It also includes the managed network services and time and materials maintenance contracts. These are some examples of the eligible equipment under the E-rate eligible services list. You have your access points and controllers, switches, firewalls, routers. If you need racks and those racks house eligible equipment, those racks are also eligible. Cabling and wiring equipment and services can be eligible. Caching services and caching servers can be eligible as well. Licensing is eligible when it supports eligible equipment. Installation and configuration services are eligible in relation to eligible equipment, as well as related training. So if you're bringing in a new solution, let's say previously you were a Cisco shop and you're bringing in an HP solution, you're redoing your entire network, rip and replace. The program will pay for your team to be trained on the new solution to a certain point, right? If you want to train 3 people and you want to get each people 16 hours, we include that in the bid specification, asking for an hourly cost for training, and we try and push it through and get it approved. And then, as I mentioned before, basic maintenance of internal connections is the OEM support. So, Vince, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. So for people that are new to E-Rate, the Category 2 budget is the amount that is allocated to each applicant over what they do now as a 5-year period. So the 5-year period was refreshed in 21-22. Each applicant gets a specific dollar amount, and it's based on the student population, as you can see there. So it started off at $167 per student, and it was indexed to inflation. So that'll be a 5-year budget cycle, meaning that the last fiscal year that you can use your current Category 2 budget is 25-26, which the application has to occur beforehand. So you'd be putting that application in the 24-25 fiscal year. So literally next fiscal year, you'll be doing your final E-Rate C2 application for the current budget. There's a budget floor for schools that have less than 150 students. That's $25,000 per school. So if you happen to be an elementary school district, and you had 10 schools and they all had less than 150 students, you would still get $25,000 per school. So, and really what's important to know about the budget, I think, is from that standpoint is kind of see where you're at. Yeah, well, the slide's not on the slide, but you'll see where you're at and, how much have you spent, and knowing that this application cycle and next application cycle are your last 2 application cycles to spend that budget, right? If you don't spend the budget, you don't get to carry it over. It goes back into the universal service fund. So really it's kind of, use it or lose it, right? The plan there for anybody that uses E-Rate on a consistent basis is to build in some level of a hardware refresh cycle into your E-Rate budget, right? We have applicants that use their budget in 1 year. They want to get as much done as they can in 1 year, switches, access points, maybe a firewall. If it can get squeezed under the budget, we'll use it and then we'll maintain it for another 5 years. And when it refreshes, we do it again. Other applicants, because of their match, right? Because E-Rate has a match. Some applicants are only paying 15% match. Others are paying 60 or 80, depending on their own district budgets or library budget. They might have to do smaller purchases each year, and they just kind of roll through the process that way. But it's really, you work with, right? If you work with TTI or whoever you work with to understand what equipment you have in place, when it's going to go into life, and then think through those, out that 5 years, right? And then you really will understand how to use the E-Rate money most effectively. Obviously, now we're going into the last 2 years of this current budget. So you're kind of setting yourself up for the next 5 years. And yeah, obviously the last highlight here is, you want to make sure you have the non-discounted share, because that's always a key. Even for us, we've gone through with applicants and went through and got funded, and they didn't realize that the non-discounted share got pulled from their budget and they can't do the project. So you always want to make sure you have the funds available for the match, or frankly, for the whole purchase, if you're going to use the bear process, right? So our applicants, right, we provide them their C2 budget to start each fiscal year, or whenever we start the discussion of the application cycle, we discuss, are there funds from prior years that we can return to increase the budget? Because if you applied for, say, you were awarded 100,000 in funding in a certain year, but only used 80, you can give that 20,000 back. That's filing a Form 500. You want to understand your budget and then the cost structure and kind of see what your overage will be or what your match will be. The product demo thing has always been a little strange, right? If you're making IT procurements, you want to, kick the tires, right? You want to see what the GUI looks like. You want to potentially test an access point to see if it works for a certain kind of auditorium or whatnot, right? And the FCC looks at demos like they can be gifts, and gifts can influence the bidding process. So it's best to demo stuff prior to posting any kind of Form 470 or associated RFP docs. Demo it, test it, return the product, right? Keeping the product would be considered a gift over the gift threshold. So I think that's kind of where the whole demo process comes in. So TTI talked about, they do cabling, right? They're very good at it. They have a team, build their own fiber. We've actually participated in a number of projects with them, and they've been successful where they've been the winning bidder. Cabling is a strange, very gray area with the program, right? So they've kind of eased this a little bit, or trying to ease it, but the bottom line is that you have to be careful with your cabling projects, right? So one, we require walkthroughs usually when we do a bid, because we want to make sure all vendors that are putting bids in know the environment. Do you need a scissor lift? Is there conduit? Is there no fire stopping? And now you're responsible for putting it in places that maybe don't even need cabling because you're the last man, through the room or whatnot. But the bottom line with cabling is that it's supposed to be for an eligible purpose, which is an educational purpose. And if you were to put in security cameras and have a security camera project and you wanted to do cabling specifically for those security cameras, the FCC would deem that ineligible. If you have a general cabling project to upgrade from Cat 5 to Cat 6 because you're redoing your LAN and some of those are security cameras, you can do it. It's really is a gray area, and it's not the easiest place to say this is eligible, this is not eligible. It's really a case-by-case basis, sometimes a drop-by-drop basis. But these are the kind of things you want to talk to either your consultant about, or use your funding for stuff that is eligible, like switches and access points, right? Because you keep the serial number there, they're eligible, and you can go on and potentially you can do your cabling project. Sometimes, if you're waiting to get funded, you might miss the summer, where the summer months is when you want to do cabling. So you might want to, you got to look at your budget and see what you can put into it. But if cabling's key, you really want to talk to your consultant, if you have one, about ensuring it's an eligible project. So equipment tracking, this was very difficult in the past because the equipment was tied to the individual entity, meaning the school building, right? So the prior Category 2 budgets were school by school. Now those budgets are district-wide, right? So yeah, if you're one school district, it doesn't matter. If you have 42 schools, it's a lot easier to maintain, to manage that budget. Now, in the past, you could not move equipment between eligible buildings for 5 years, or after 3 years, you could with permission. After 5, you could do whatever you want, right? Now, as long as the building's eligible, you can move equipment between schools, right? So you could take something from an elementary school to the high school or vice versa, no problem. Now, the one thing, there's no time constraints, no notifications, right? You still want to track where everything is, because if you ever do get a major audit, they're going to want to see the serial number, and they're going to want to see the blinking switch, right? The lights on the blinking lights on the switch. One thing to know here is that NIFs, non-instructional facilities, are still not eligible for Category 2 equipment. So that could be a standalone board office or a standalone transportation department. Any facility that does not provide instruction, a classroom. Now, athletic fields have been considered eligible because, gym class can take place there, stuff like that. So you still can't buy switches for all your schools and say, oh, 2 years later, we're going to move 10 of them into the, the standalone board office and buy another 10 for that school. They don't allow that currently under program rules. Okay. From an invoicing standpoint, which is, I would say, it's where the rubber meets the road with this program, right? Because you can get funded as much as you want, but if the money doesn't get released, it doesn't matter. There's two invoicing methods. There's bear and there's SPI, right? And so the bear method is when you pay in full and then you get a reimbursement, billed entity applicant reimbursement. And the SPI is service provider invoicing. And that is when you request that the service provider invoice the program for your discounted share. Right. So if you're an 80% district and the project's 100,000, I'm doing easy math, you would pay the provider 20 grand and they would go ask the fund for 80,000. With E-rate, providers are obligated to offer SPI. So they have to offer that if they want to participate in the program. But they can, they don't have to process a SPI order unless the funding request is funded and a 46 is filed. Obviously the money needs to be, allocated to that project and approved before they're going to process the order. again, it's all about, does the invoice align with the original quote and what was funded, right? If you were buying if you got quoted part XYZ for $100, you applied for part XYZ for $100, were funded for 80 of that 100, and then you went and bought part XYZ2, they would most likely not release the money if they check that invoice. You would have to go do a service substitution and get that changed. So OEM BMIC, basic maintenance of internal connections. This is like the typical, I apologize, I forget what Aruba calls their HP Care or whatnot, right? It used to be called, I think, the Care Packs, or used to be, but so this
Foundation Care. It's Foundation Care.
Foundation Care. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the typical foundation care. Now, this is something that we've been petitioning the program with our peers about for years. It makes no sense. If you buy a license, a right to use license with an access point from any provider that includes basic maintenance, that can be eligible for 1, 5, or 10 years. But if you buy just the maintenance and there's no licensing, so more of a legacy kind of maintenance, you can only get that approved for 1 year. You can go buy 3 years of maintenance, but you're only going to get that 1 year paid for, and then you can apply again for the second year. And honestly, it's hard to get sometimes. The reviewers make it very difficult. We kind of suggest to do it on a year-by-year basis, even though it's more expensive that way. You're more inclined to get funded. So, and you want to work with your provider, right? We when we do the bid process, we really try to focus the providers on dictating what's ineligible and eligible. Not everybody knows, things change, including us. We don't get to, sometimes something was eligible, now it's not during the review process, and we have to fight it. But there may be ineligibles in your purchase, and you may be forced to cover 100% of that cost. All right, so this slide. There are potentially 3 new programs that the FCC is looking to push through the Universal Service Fund, and that will touch E-rate potentially. 2 of them will touch E-rate. One will be just a USF program, but it will be like E-rate. So the first program is the school bus Wi-Fi. That program is 100% a go. The FCC, on a 3-2 vote, has dictated that this will be an eligible service. They are moving at lightning speed. They have not released the eligible service list or the regulations around it, but it will be eligible for next fiscal year. And I don't mean to apply next fiscal year. I mean, it'll be eligible to apply now for next fiscal year. Now, there's a lot, we could probably talk for 25 minutes about this, right? But even more, but there's a lot to unwind here. The basic premise is that the equipment, router, right, antenna, the installation of that router and antenna, and the monthly service to enable a school bus to have Wi-Fi access, cellular Wi-Fi access, will be eligible under the program. Now, the vast majority of applicants in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania, from analysis that we've kind of worked through already, lease their school buses or rent them from a company. We don't know how that's going to be covered, right? So we're not sure if a private company will be able to have this equipment installed, or if you're just the monthly service will be. We're not sure. There's no talk about like minimum, transportation time, but it's going to be limited to students. It's going to be limited to educational purpose. It has to be SIPA compliant. There's going to be a lot of, a lot of nuance to how this funding is dispersed. And we're really honestly have no one has any idea. It's not just me and Jeff. No one in the country has any idea right now how this is going to happen.
And I think one thing to consider in that regard, if I can, Vince, is if you're interested in school bus Wi-Fi and the area is still as gray in a month as it is now, maybe spend the next 6, 8, 10, 12 months exploring what solutions are available and apply for it next year, instead of trying to rush in an application this year when, frankly, we don't even know how they're going to treat this service from an application and application review standpoint. So that's
now,
just
if you have it.
But also, it's not going to go away in the future, or at least we don't think it will. So, that's also something to consider, is maybe just waiting a year and letting the dust settle before you jump into this with both feet.
Now, if you already have the service,
right,
you won't need to buy the equipment because you would already have it. You may be eligible to get that monthly bill paid for.
Yep.
Now, that's great, but you don't know what reporting you may have to have. Do you have to show that there was usage each month? If a bus is disabled for 3 months, can you receive money for the service on that bus? Or do you have, there's going to be, it's all right. It gets a little granular and it's all in the details, and we don't have that yet. The second program, while maybe very helpful for the community, it remains to be seen, will not be eligible for the 24-25 fiscal year. That will probably be the first application window. It's not a guarantee that this money will become made available for it. And you can call it the hotspot lending program, if you will, kind of like with ECF, right? Where you can provide a student, or for a library, a patron, you could provide them a hotspot to take home with them so that they can do homework or do something with an educational purpose. And again, if it goes through E-rate, you have to make sure that that connection is SIPA compliant. So you're going to have to somehow lock the hotspot down to potentially, the MAC address on a device, and that device will have some SIPA compliance. Frankly, there's a lot to unwind with this one, and there's really no clarity on what the FCC is going to do here, or if they're going to make it even approve it, right? So this is out for comment. There's a lot of contention about if this should be going through the E-rate program or not, and that's being discussed now openly in the public.
Yeah,
So,
and I think also one thing that's also notable is that in the NPRM, the FCC is asking for feedback on more issues and more questions than they usually do. And the hotspot NPRM has something like it just has maybe like 4 or 5 times the normal number of questions posed by the FCC where they're soliciting feedback from stakeholders. So it really does go to show how complicated this particular endeavor is and will be. And so, we're kind of waiting to see again where they end up with this and where the dust settles there.
So the third one, cybersecurity pilot, is the one everybody's most excited about, and is probably the least exciting for everyone. Everybody should be least excited about. So the FCC is attempting to, as a regulatory agency, to take the initiative and kind of plant the flag on being able to regulate cybersecurity for public institutions, at least. Right? There's competing organizations that want to do this. Homeland Security as CISA. No one knows where this is going to turn up, right? Or if the FCC is going to be told they cannot statutorily do this. So we're not sure how this is going to play out. This is not a guarantee. They're suggesting right now to take $200 million of the Universal Service Fund, which a lot of people think they can't do legally, but we'll find out. That's going to play out in the courts probably. But they're going to take $200 million of this Universal Service Fund and create a pilot. That pilot's going to require whatever entity wants to enter into it. It may be just schools and libraries. We're not sure because it's not part of E-rate. So this is not part of the school and library program. It could be a hospital system. It could be something, maybe a county system, right? We really don't know what would be an eligible entity at this point, from what I understand. But you're going to have to apply to be part of the pilot. Once you're in the pilot, you're in it for 3 years. Then you need to go through the application cycle, meaning you still have to do Form 470s they're going to use the E-rate forms because they're available, even though it's not part of the E-rate program. You're going to have to go through all the bidding processes, pick whatever solutions they have as an eligible solution. We don't know what that is. It could be DDoS, it could be malware protection, it could be endpoint protection. It could be training. It could be, listen, cybersecurity is a very broad topic. So there's a lot of things that could be eligible, but if you think about it, 200 million nationally over 3 years isn't going to cover a lot. So once you're in the program and you receive funding, you're also required to do what we believe is going to be monthly or quarterly reporting on how you use that product, how effective it is, how cost effective it is. It's going to be laborious for the applicants, to be honest. And I think most applicants would, when they really take a look at how this might play out, might be better off just deploying a solution that they need to protect their network without kind of waiting for this to play out. So unfortunately, I feel like this is more, it's a really good idea that they are just kind of dipping their toe in the water with. And I don't think that there's going to be a lot for it for, at least the applicants that we represent in, through E-rate. So.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily intended to be a PR move, but because cybersecurity is such a hot topic, I think, some people have perceived it in that way. I think it is a legitimate effort to implement a pilot and to collect data and see what they can do. But again, because everybody's mind is on cyber, there's been some feelings that maybe this is just something that the FCC is doing to make people happy, but with no real intent to pursue it because of the statutory limitations.
Lastly, there's a new invoicing process. USAC had to retire their old system. Homeland Security deemed it unsafe, which is kind of funny because now they'll be administering a cyber program. But anyway, they have to retire their own invoicing system, and they have a new one that goes to the E-Rate Productivity Center. And bears and spies are filed through that now, so you have to kind of go through there, and you have to make sure your SAM.gov and your UEIs are updated. Because as you make changes going forward on the 498, you'll have to have an active SAM.gov and UEI number, or you will not receive funds from the program.
That was great. Thank you, Vince and Jeff.
Well, of course. Thank you.
Hopefully these gentlemen got your brain thinking, and maybe you have some questions. Feel free, if you do, to plug them into the Q&A. I believe the chat is disabled because we're doing a recording, but the Q&A is open. If you've got any questions, feel free to plug them in there. Happy to take them live, whether it has to do with, E-rate eligibility, what have you, timelines, anything that you've been wondering about and would like to get answered. We've got the right people on the call, so happy to answer any questions you might have.
If it's anything technical, I can handle that as well. If you have anything from a wired, wireless, speeds, feeds, firewall, copper, fiber, we must have done a really good job.
We crushed it, man. We crushed it.
Yes, we crushed it.
Great job.
We did. No one has anything to ask me.
We left them speechless, guys.
We did have a question.
Slides
The slides available. So I'm actually recording the session, so I'd be happy to shoot it out to you when it's all done, if that's okay, if that works.
Of course, yeah, of course.
You're very welcome.
Well, with that, I think we could probably give you 15 minutes back of your day. Thank everyone for joining.
Thank
and
you.
we look forward to meeting with you and talking with you.
So each of you gotten invites from me. If you do have any questions, follow up afterwards. Happy to route them to the proper people. So just shoot me a note. Happy to answer any questions you might have. And we look forward to talking to you and hearing from you. If we can help you at all here at TTI, or if you need contact information for Jeff and Vince, we'd be happy to connect you there as well. So thank you very much for taking some time and spending it with us today. And we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. On behalf of everyone here and everyone at E-Rate Consulting, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care,
Everyone.